And so there's like just this whole idea of like what would we have been if we had been left alone? Like, I don't
Yeah.
even know. So,
Yeah.
like, how do you tap into that?
Wow.
And then how do you find a visual language to express that in your artwork?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough one. That's why I love surrealism, I think, because I can start making up stories, and it kind of it can just be my. I look at it as a space to be able to like express my unique experience and not try to communicate this like larger idea of what people or people necessarily like relating to, like, oh, this is what all these people experience. Like, no, this is what I experience, this is what I see and
Right.
observe. And it becomes more interesting when you find people connect to that, because they see something and
That's a
they're like,
really good
oh,
point.
and especially when they come up with their own stories, it's like, all right, so even though this is my one way of communicating this thing, somebody sees some way of viewing it as part of their experience, as
Yeah.
opposed to being like boldly saying, oh, this is the Black experience, and so I'm gonna
Right.
make these artworks that's the Black experience. I think even people within particular cultures they're really good at it, they might be telling that story of African Americans existing in America, but they're telling it through their story. Like one of my favorite artists back home, Ray Johnson, like a lot of his work speaks about him being a father or him being a husband, right? And it'll be like reflections of what it's like to raise a son in America, or what's it like to support a wife in America, or African American wife at that. And so, as much as his work fits within just the mold of being African American, it's like very focused on his personal experience. And so I can really like tune into that. And even like
Yeah.
another one, Poetry Jackson. Like when I got to meet her, when I met
Yeah.
her and looked at her work, it's a lot of her work is kind of based on the metaphysical and kind of surrealistic worlds and things of that nature, and not and it was funny, like when I first met her, she had works that was it was kind of like I wouldn't say all over the place, but there was just like so many explorations of ideas and concepts. And then the more we got to know each other, the more it got like focused on very like particular identifiers. And but then like with discussion, she's like, man, I got to get back into like just being out there and just like doing this stuff, because it's so fun to like go back to older works and be like, I loved what I was thinking here, and now I can paint a lot better. And I think what happens with some
Yeah.
artists is like I think it happens when you get into that raw like emotional feeling, what you want to create, and you just do it. You're happy with it, but it usually isn't your best work.
Right.
And then you teach yourself how to do something else different. And for me, that was
Yeah.
painting. Like I could always illustrate, but I wasn't very good at painting. So it took me a while to understand painting the way that I wanted to paint, or figure out how I wanted to paint. And then once I figured out a visual language painting, I was like, now how can I use this to tell these stories that I used to try to tell when I was younger and making art? Because I can probably do them a lot better now. And so it's really fun to see people go through that. It's like, all right, let me get back to the basics. Let me learn something again, then make this
Yeah.
artwork that really reflects my story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny because like I feel like I'm in the opposite problem right now. I've been so focused for years and years and years on getting the technical stuff right
Mm-hmm.
that I end up looking at my work and I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't say anything except the fact that I know how to draw and like I figured out how to paint. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, okay, now I need to start working on that visual language
Mm-hmm.
and symbolism. And, because especially being a teacher too, and seeing this lack of craftsmanship,
Yeah.
I it's like this is the problem with American or with not American, but art education, like modern art
Mm-hmm.
education. There's so much emphasis on thought and
Yeah.
creativity, which is not a bad thing, but there's not really any emphasis on craftsmanship
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
And like I'm such a diehard realist and I'm all about craftsmanship, but
Yeah.
like now I'm like I'm so far on that end that I'm like I need to come back and work on my expressionism.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be hard to look at student work and be like, I see what you're thinking, but I don't know that it's being communicated. you
I
know?
know.
Oh
I,
man, it's funny.
it's like, is
Um
this a successful piece?
right. Yeah. You still the thing about having gone through arts education is you get those formulaic kind of processes of and technical skills of why a composition, what makes a good composition, why is this? I remember it was a friend on Facebook that had made a piece, and she was just like, she was at a point where she was like really exploring arts, and she was making this piece that kind of reflected the different chakras, and the composition was pretty like dead on center, and all the chakras were like exactly where they should be on the body, and it almost looked more like a medical chart in my
Oh no.
mind, even though it was
Yeah.
very like the style was very like I say anime or Japanese animation style as far as the illustration, but it was just like the composition to me. And so I sent her a message. I was like, hey, maybe you should maybe like explore the composition a little bit differently, just to give a little bit of this, a little bit of that, gave some suggestions. And she just gave me her response back of like, oh, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And I left it at that. I was like, I'm not gonna fight to make you make work that I think you should be making or
Right.
anything of that nature. But it was just to, kind of throw it out there. And without me going like, I'm an art teacher, it's not like to toot my horn and say that I know what should be done, but it was just like,
I know.
when I see people at these like points of like growing, especially if they're like self-motivated in the arts, and like, oh, you got something going, you're just like, it's almost like you can see where they can go, and you just want to push them a little bit. And it's like, hey, just like, if you just do this one thing that's not going to affect your style and your thought process and what you're thinking, it's just going to potentially make it better. Just try it. It's almost like, just put it in the
Yeah.
sketchbook and see if it works out for you. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
you should finish it. Make another
Yeah,
piece.
just
Finish what you're doing
take
and
a
make another.
photo and put it in an editing
Yeah,
program and just try this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
have to do it myself.
Yeah.
But it's kind of it when we were talking about like quality of work and choice, it reminded me of something else that I read in one of the articles about how museums collect or institutions collect, and um, it was how they brought up like the way that racism is practiced, kind of subliminally, um, where like if you challenge an institution on why they have these white artists all back to back to back in as exhibitions, and they say it's artistic choice or artistic quality that choosing to do this, it's like that's just another way of saying it's another way of just being racist about it. It's like I'm doing it for this one thing because they have this. Like, are there no other artists of any other culture that has artistic choice or quality? Or you just
Mhm.
it's a way of saying I want I want white artists and they did this. And I think the tough part is when the people who are making the decisions
They get
have,
comfortable with like this
yeah,
narrow list that they're willing to look at,
right,
and they don't bother going beyond that list.
yeah,
And then they've got connections, so they don't go beyond those connections.
yeah, yeah.
You
I
know.
had so when I back in August, I got a job working at a art gallery here as an art handler. So I've been happy in that position and I've enjoyed it. But one thing I expressed was, or I even just thought about in working for the gallery, was that I was like, my work doesn't fit here. I was like, it's fun to do the work and explore and learn, but like I find myself more or less, I'll say I find myself less interested in the work that we're exhibiting personally. And I'm like, the more I deal with it, the more I get interested, because I'm, some of these artists are around, so I get to meet them, and so I could like, enjoy their work and their composition and get to know them. And that's when I get to, appreciate their artwork a little bit more. But it's like most of it is just like, most of it is a lot of abstract work.
Mhm.
And in me wanting to explore abstraction when I got here, I was like, it's not enough for me. After seeing the work that I've been kind of handling, I was like, it's not enough for me. I need to tell my story a lot more than I want to just be successful at selling artwork. As much as I want that, it's like I need
Yeah.
to stay true to what it is that it's like, all right, I'm gonna do these abstract pieces, but I need to figure out
Yeah.
another way to add this, continue to add my story in there, and not just be this, oh, here's this little fun, this fun exploration of
Yeah.
color and composition that I wanted to do. Um, because the other end is like, I'm also meeting the people who are collecting this artwork, and I'm like, these people are spending thousands of dollars on artwork. So it's like, if something happens in your mind where you're like, if I just make artwork a little bit close to it, they'll buy it. You know, I'm just like, wait a
Right.
minute, now I'm just making artwork to sell and not making
Yeah.
artwork that they might be interested in. But I was like, the collector base doesn't look like the collectors that would be interested in my work. And so it becomes it's a challenge of trying to figure that out. And then yeah, but then like Alicia Keys and her husband have a home out here, so then it's like they just
Hey.
show up at the right place. So
Well,
I did
and
just get a residency out here, so
for real. Yeah, and that's the thing, because like the more that I think about it, I think the way that you and I both approach art is very similar. I mean, it's very cerebral, and it's like being a researcher. It's like being a scientific researcher that needs grants
yeah.
in order to be able to work, because like the kind of work that we're trying to produce, um, you know, it's like it really is like doing a research paper, and having to really focus on what questions we're trying to answer for ourselves and have that reflected in our artwork. And then like you said, like hopefully that work, like how you resonate with like Ray Johnson's work, um that artwork will find the right audience. um but and then that goes back to the other thing. It's like, where the gallery owners who are going to appreciate and have clientele who can actually appreciate and purchase this kind of work,
Right.
because like when you don't stick to making the art that actually means something to you, when you decide, like everybody's always telling me like, oh, you can just paint a bunch of flowers. I'm like, yeah, I can, but there's actually meaning behind the flowers that I'm painting. Like they're more like portraits to me, and there's a reason that I pick the subjects that I do. Like just straight up painting a flower doesn't really mean anything to me. And like I don't want to just paint a bunch of flowers for people, even though, yeah, they sell. So like that's the hard part. I know they sell.
Yeah, as a
But then, like,
business owner, it looks like I need to paint flowers, but
yeah,
it's hilarious.
it's hard being an artist, man.
Yeah, and defining like what it is that you want to be your version of success,
and not want to just like I don't want the door to just open just because all of a sudden like Asian artists become hot.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm about at the point where I'm ready to walk through that door, though.
I know, right? No, I hear you.
Yeah, because one of my old professors was saying that, like when all that, like I was mentioning like 2 years ago, when all that stuff was happening, he was like, "Look, for the next 3 to 5 years, the market's going to be hot for us. You might as well get in on it and do what you can to like take advantage of that opportunity. And you really have to trust who you are as a person to know that your intentions are always going to be, where you intend them to be." And so
I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
As long as the decisions that you make don't leave you with like this little growing black hole inside of you, I think you'll be all right. Yeah.
Because I just got a residency opportunity, and I've been like mulling over it, like what do I want to create if I get this program? I've been thinking that before I got accepted for it, and I'm still at odds with that. Luckily, it's not for at least until fall, if not like 2023. So I've got a lot of time to mull over it. And but I'm also like, by the time I get to the residency, like the work that's like welling up inside of me to create, I'm probably gonna like already make it and be like, I won't be done with it, but I found myself that like in that space where I'm just like, I just need to make the work that I need to make. And so I have like 3 or 4 bodies of work that I'm just like exploring. Some of it's just like pure experimentation and concepts. And the other bit is kind of like deep dive into identity and trying to understand that story, and not waiting for the right opportunity to make the art if it's already on my heart to make. And then letting that speak for, or letting that be the work that gets, recognized or found for, And
well,
even
keep doing it while you can, because man, if you ever decide to have kids, it really puts a dent in your art making time.
Yeah, Yeah, that needs to be I think it's a question I'm gonna ask some of the artists that we deal with. 'Cause at least one of them has like two young children, but he's pretty successful as an artist. And so I'm more so curious of how like how many years he's been, or how long he got to focus on his art before he had
Yeah.
children. Because I feel like that transition could be a lot easier if you're already like set into that pace that you want to be in as far as making art
Yeah.
versus where I am now, where it's like I have a job to maintain my income, and then
Right.
I make, I take the time to make my art and find opportunities. Right, I'd much rather be like, all right, the job was great. I got some good opportunities. I've gotten to a certain level of success where I don't need the job anymore, and everything's the arts, and I can
Yeah.
just,
I don't know though. I mean, because like at least throughout history, and I'm pretty sure it probably happens a lot now too, is that usually if it's a male, they'll still have the opportunity to make art
yeah,
because a lot of times, the caring of the family and the household falls on the woman.
hmm
And I remember when I learned, I can't remember if, I want to say it was Henry David Thoreau, and I don't think it was Emerson because I always get the two of those mixed up. But like all that stuff about him going off and living in the woods and having time to write down his thoughts and all this sort of stuff. That's all we learned in school.
hmm
And then I recently learned like he literally lived within a very short walk of his mom's house. And
hmm
like she and a maid would do his laundry and bring him food. And I was just
yeah,
like, what? You know?
yeah,
So like, okay, so now I understand why you were able to just sit there in the woods and look at the
yeah,
lake and write a book about your thoughts,
yeah,
Like
yeah. Freedom of thought is a privilege. So,
it really is. It
yeah,
really is. And
yeah,
man, I was like, that ticked me off. I was like,
yeah.
oh
Wow,
geez.
I get it. That is hilarious. That about sums it up. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what sums it up. Wow. Um, yeah, I think we've covered. Yeah, I'm glad. I usually had the conversation I had in my head before I got on here was like so like perfect, but uh, there's nothing more perfect than the actual conversation. So this was great. I really enjoyed it.
What did we not cover from the one in your head?
I can't remember because it was a run through to see. I think we did, but it was just like the order that I did. It was so like perfect. It was like, oh, this will lead into this will lead into that, this will lead into, But I only had one person's perspective to go through. So I was like, of course these questions are all going to get answered just like this, but obviously they won't. And then I get on here and I was like, it's not like I had it like written down to like rehearse. So it's like, let's see if it goes that way.
No, it feels really good talking about this because I mean, it's helped keep my brain open to so many things that I'm aware of, but sometimes just living my life, I lose perspective of, because
Mhm.
it's not, like what we were talking about, you kind of live in your bubble and it doesn't directly affect you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You as a museum goer, it's always like I had pushed my contemporaries to do the same, like going out and seeing other people's artwork, and even just like researching what successful artwork looks like and seeing the variety of it and
Yeah.
vastness of it
Yeah.
can help remind you that what you're doing and what you're like aligned with doing is enough.
Yeah. And it
Because you can,
matters.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I can get at times I get caught up in being like, oh, that person painted so realistically and I need to be painting realistically like that, that's so good. And then I go to work and I'm like, this is a 4-color pattern and this person's artwork is selling, so maybe I'm fine. So I don't have to get so technical and deep, and I also don't have to do this. You do have to like also recognize like the age of the artist and when they were creating, and like the what was happening in the arts and why they're creating, why they might be attracted to making that type of artwork. But
Right.
I think as long as you're in tune with like what it is that you're doing, like you're gonna find that variety even within your own like demographics. Like, all right, this person's doing fully abstract. Like there's a show up in LA right now that I'm like, my work should definitely be in this show. But who knows how someone sees your work or when they get to see it. But it's called
Yeah.
like abstracting reality. And I was like, I just had a show 3 years ago called Life in the Abstract, and it was about this exact subject matter. And I was like, well, whatever.
Did you talk to the gallery owner?
I
Be
did.
like,
I
"Oh,
met him once.
show you my work."
I spoke to him because another colleague of mine was having a show there, and I was like, "Oh, this would be a way in." I was like, "Oh yeah, I know Tommy from back east," and that was about as far as it went. I was like, "It's
And
cool.
you
It's only
just
my
never
first time."
know. You
Yeah,
just never
I was
know.
like, "It's cool. It's my first time. I'll show my support first, and then let it." But I'm like because I know it's accessibility. I'm like,
Yeah,
the relationship can be made within a few years or less. Like it's just
right.
taking the time to really like investigate it.
Yeah,
Things don't
I know.
work for me
I
well.
need to do more of that.
Yeah, people learn. I learned for myself that I'm a much more successful just putting myself in the space and people just like getting to know me
Yeah,
and then either discovering that I'm an artist. 'Cause I'm not a very good like I'm not a good advertiser of myself. Um, outside of the tools that exist for that to already like Instagram. It's like, all right, I'll just post and share it, but I'm not very good at like running up and saying, hey, I got a show, or hey, I make art, I do this. I'd
yeah, I
rather the
know, me
question be
too.
asked, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I make art. Here's my website. And I do this."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
um, I'm more so in that direction. So I just know if I get
yeah,
myself in those spaces, I tend to get great results.
yeah, yeah. I know. Like, I'm kind of at that because I love doing oil painting too,
Hmm.
but I can't really do both oil painting and watercolor at the same time just because I don't have the time to balance both of
Yeah.
those. And so I'm starting to actually build a reputation in watercolor. So I'm like, okay, well,
Hmm.
I'll just stick with watercolor for a while. But like on the flip side of that, the identity stuff that I've been talking about, everything that I picture doing is in oil. Like I don't want to do it in watercolor. I want to do it in
Yeah.
oil. Um, so like I'm trying to figure that out too. Like, okay, how am I going to make time to do this? Because like I don't even have a very big studio. I don't have a lot of
Hmm.
room to just let a bunch of oil paints dry,
Yeah.
because I want to work big
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
You
that's the
have
challenge.
to. Yeah. Have things stacked up everywhere here,
Are
and
you in oil or acrylic? What are you working in?
acrylic. I work in
Okay.
acrylic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, space is definitely a big issue. That's one thing I'm facing now. So I'm glad about that residency program. But the fact that I either have to wait a year, possibly wait a year to do it, it's like, oh man, all these big artworks I plan on making, gotta wait to do them.
Yeah.
Like,
Cool.
all right. Well,
All
again, thanks
right.
for coming on. This was
Yeah.
a great conversation with Rowena Finn and myself, Mensa. Um, I'll add all the things that you can follow and find me here on video somewhere.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, so talk to you soon, and
Yeah.
hopefully see you soon. I said I'll be home in July for my show, so
Yeah. I can't wait to see that
you'll be
show.
hearing about that. It'll be my artwork based on my residency in Cuba that was 3 years
Oh,
ago.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
it'll be like the 3 year anniversary. Honestly, great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll use
Cool.
that as advertisement. Yeah, it'll be at the offsite gallery, so everybody goes there.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Very
All
cool.
right. All
All right.
right.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.